looked human, but there was something about him that made him feel not human. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The vanishing headlights, the constant unease, and now this guy in the truck. I put my car in drive and started heading home, but it felt like I was being followed. Welcome, horror buffs, to your ultimate destination for a heavy dose of bone-chilling encounters that will make your heart race and skin crawl uncontrollably. Are you ready for an intense rush of fear and thrill like never before? Then let's dive straight into the stories. The story was posted by Ask Uton 688 on r/no-sleep. Please make sure you know the train before you get on. I don't know if this is the right place to post, but if you're reading this and you've taken the train to Black Point Terminal, stop now, turn back, forget this place exists. 2 months ago, I moved to the city for a fresh start. My apartment wasn't much: peeling paint, a dripping faucet, and a window view of an alleyway dumpster. The only upside? The rent was dirt cheap and it was close to the subway. The landlord warned me about the neighborhood, but I didn't care. I just needed a place to disappear for a while. That's where it all began, with the subway. I first noticed it during my nightly commutes. Every other night, around 11:03 p.m., an unlisted train would glide into the station. The announcements on the platform would cut out just before it arrived. No chime, no robotic voice, just silence. The train itself was off. It had this muted, almost wrong shade of gray, like it had been bleached by decades underground. The windows were pitch black, reflecting nothing, not even the station lights. Its sign always read, "To Black Point Terminal," a name that wasn't on any city map. At first I thought it was a maintenance train, or maybe an old line they hadn't updated. But something about it unsettled me. No one else seemed to notice it, like literally no one. Crowded platform or not, people never looked up when it pulled in. They just stood there, heads down, scrolling their phones. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to wait for it one night. When it arrived, I stepped onto the platform as its doors slid open. A cold draft hit me, like I'd walked into a morgue. The interior was dimly lit by a flickering yellow light. The seats were all occupied, but the passengers, they weren't right. They were dressed in outdated clothes, tattered suits, worn dresses, some even in military uniforms that looked like they were from the 1940s. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and their faces were slack, expressionless. They didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there like mannequins. Against all common sense, I stepped inside. The doors shut behind me with a hiss, and the train lurched forward. My phone lost signal immediately. I wanted to turn back, but the doors wouldn't open. The passengers turned to look at me all at once, heads swiveling like synchronized dolls. And that's when I noticed the smell. It was the stench of decay, heavy and wet, like something rotting deep in the walls. I tried to avoid their gazes, focusing on the floor, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of them smile. Not a friendly smile, a too wide, lip-splitting grin that revealed rows of needle-like teeth. I stumbled back, trying to get away, but the train jolted to a stop. When I looked up, we were at a station, but it wasn't any station I'd ever seen. The walls were lined with rusted metal and graffiti in a language I couldn't read. The air was thick with fog, and the platform was empty except for a single figure standing under a broken light. It was a woman, or at least I think it was. Her face was obscured by a veil, and her hands were clasped in front of her. As the doors opened, she stepped inside and sat down without looking at me. The train began moving again. I didn't have the courage to speak to her, but she started humming, a low, haunting melody that echoed in the silent car. The other passengers began to sway to the rhythm, their heads lolling like puppets on strings. The train stopped several more times, each station more unsettling than the last. One was submerged in water, fish swimming lazily past the windows. Another was filled with ash, where skeletal figures wandered aimlessly on the platform. I don't remember how long I was on that train. It felt like hours, maybe days. But eventually we arrived at Black Point Terminal. The station was vast, an underground cathedral with towering arches and an impossible number of tracks stretching into the void. The passengers shuffled off the train, one by one, disappearing into the shadows. The woman in the veil turned to me as she stood. Her face, or what was left of it, was a mass of raw, seeping flesh. Her eyes black pits that seemed to suck in the light. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice a chorus of whispers. "Now you belong to the line." Her words echoed through the cavernous station, her black pit eyes holding mine as if they could pull me into their depths. Then, as quickly as she had spoken, she turned and began walking toward the endless dark beyond the platform. I wanted to move, to chase after her, to demand answers, but my legs felt like they were encased in cement. The air had grown heavier, colder. Somewhere in the distance I heard a sound, like metal scraping against stone, slow and deliberate. The train doors didn't reopen. Instead, the windows began to fog over from the inside, obscuring my view of the station. Panic rose in my chest. The seats were empty now. The passengers had vanished. And, the only sound was my own shallow breathing. Then I saw it. The fog on the window wasn't random. It was forming shapes. Words. "Get off before it leaves you." A sharp hiss came from the far end of the train car. I turned toward the sound and my blood ran cold. Something was crawling down the aisle. It moved on all fours, its limbs long and jointed at unnatural angles. Its skin was stretched too tightly over its frame, gray and mottled, and its head wasn't right. It was too large, the jaw hanging open in a slack, hungry gape, teeth jagged like shards of broken glass. Its eyes were fixed on me. I scrambled backward, slamming into the locked doors. My hands clawed at the controls, desperate to find a way out. The thing moved closer, the sound of its limbs dragging across the floor echoing in the silent car. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know who or what I was begging. "Please, let me off." The doors opened. I fell backward onto the platform, gasping for air. My head hit the cold concrete, and for a moment, the world spun. When I sat up, the train was gone. The only sign it had been there, a faint breeze that carried the stench of rot. I was alone at Black Point Terminal. The platform stretched on forever, a labyrinth of empty tracks and rusted benches. The fog that had hung in the air now clung to the ground, thick and suffocating. In the distance, I could still hear the sound of scraping metal. It was getting louder. I forced myself to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I started walking along the platform, every step echoing in the vast emptiness. Then I saw it, a doorway carved into the far wall. It was small, almost hidden, and flickering light spilled from within. I didn't have a choice. I stepped inside. The room was cramped, the walls lined with monitors showing grainy black and white footage of the subway. I recognized some of the stations, ones I'd passed through on the train. Others were unfamiliar, their platforms littered with bones or submerged in black water. In the center of the room stood an old man. His back was to me, his hunched frame silhouetted by the glow of the screens. He was muttering to himself, his hands twitching as they hovered over a control panel. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He froze. Slowly, he turned to face me. His eyes were gone, empty sockets staring through me, and his mouth twisted into a grimace. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "Please," I begged. "I just want to go home." He laughed then, a dry, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "Home? You're part of the line now. There's no going back." He turned back to the monitors, his hands moving across the controls. "But you can still serve a purpose," he muttered. Before I could ask what he meant, the floor beneath me shifted, the tiles cracked and crumbled, and I was falling. I landed in darkness, the air knocked from my lungs. Above me, I could see the faint outline of the room, the old man staring down at me with that empty, unblinking gaze. "Run," he said. The ground beneath me trembled. I turned and saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. They moved like the passengers on the train, their heads tilting unnaturally, their limbs jerking with every step. They were smiling. I ran. The tunnel shifted and warped around me, and suddenly, I wasn't in a tunnel anymore. I was in a maze of trains, endless cars stretching in every direction, stacked on top of one another like some twisted junkyard. Each train was different. Some were rusted hulks with shattered windows. Others gleamed as if freshly polished, their doors yawning open. And from each car, I heard whispers, voices calling my name, promises of safety if I just stepped inside. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The scraping sound was behind me, growing louder, closer. I turned a corner, only to find another row of trains blocking my path. Their lights flickered, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. I ducked between two cars, my chest heaving as I forced myself forward. My legs felt like they were giving out, but the whispers and the scraping pushed me on. Then, I saw it. A single door at the center of the maze. It didn't belong to any train. It stood alone, glowing faintly in the dark. I ran toward it, my heart pounding. The whispers turned to screams, the scraping a deafening roar. Shadows lunged at me from the sides, cold and clawing, but I didn't stop. I reached the door and threw it open. Blinding light engulfed me, and for a moment, I felt weightless. The screams, the scraping, the suffocating darkness, all of it fell away. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a field. The air was crisp, the sky an endless gray, and the horizon stretched on without end. But something was wrong. The ground beneath my feet wasn't dirt or grass. It was cold metal, the twisted wreckage of train tracks crisscrossing in every direction, disappearing into the void. I turned slowly, searching for any sign of the door I just passed through, but it was gone. Instead, there was only the maze. The trains were here, stretching out as far as I could see, stacked high and leaning at impossible angles. Their lights flickered faintly in the distance like fireflies, but none of them moved. I wasn't alone. Figures stood between the trains, barely visible in the dim light. They were passengers, I realized. The same hollow-eyed, slack-jawed people I'd seen on the train. But now they were watching me, their heads tilting in unison as I took a step back. Behind me, the ground rumbled. I turned, and my stomach sank. A new train was coming, gliding silently across the tracks. Its gray surface shimmered like a mirage, its windows pitch black. The sign above it read, "No return." I ran again, stumbling over the tangled tracks, my breath hitching as the figures began to move. They didn't chase me outright, but they appeared in every direction I turned, stepping out from the shadows, blocking every path. Their whispers rose in a cacophony, speaking words I didn't understand. The train horn blared, low and mournful, vibrating through the air. I tripped, landing hard on the cold metal. When I looked up, the train was right there, its doors sliding open with a hiss. And standing inside was the woman in the veil. She raised a hand, beckoning. Her voice echoed in my mind, not in words, but in feelings, an overwhelming sense of inevitability. "You were never meant to leave," she said. I tried to crawl back, but the ground shifted beneath me, dragging me toward the train. I dug my fingers into the gaps between the tracks, screaming, but it was useless. The doors loomed closer, her silhouette framed in that sickly yellow light. Just as the darkness began to close in again, something changed. From somewhere far off in the maze, I heard a sound, a new train, this one blaring its horn with a sharp, ear-splitting pitch. Its lights cut through the shadows, brighter and more focused than anything I'd seen before. The passengers froze, their heads snapping toward the noise. Even the veiled woman turned, her hand faltering. I didn't think. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the light, leaving her and the train behind. As I reached the source, the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell, plunging headfirst into the blinding light. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. The clock read 11:03 p.m. At first, I thought it was over. I stayed off the subway, avoided the platform, and tried to convince myself it had all been a dream. But now I know the truth. The maze didn't let me go. I still hear the train horn in my sleep, distant but growing louder every night. The light in my apartment flickers at the same time the train used to arrive. And sometimes, just before I wake up, I see her standing in the corner of my room, her veil billowing in an unseen wind. I don't think I escaped. I think the maze is waiting for me to come back. Let's now move on to the next story from C0C0 Colin. I went for a drive to clear my head, but something wasn't right. Ever since I got my full license and could drive on my own, I'd head out late at night to clear my head or just unwind. I'd sneak out of my room, careful not to make any noise, grab my coat, boots, phone, and wallet, and then drive off to some back roads. I'd usually be gone for just 1 or 2 hours, enough time to drive somewhere, park, and unwind before heading back. I kept this to myself. During the drive, I'd maybe see 1 or 2 other cars, and I almost never encountered anyone when I got to my destination. These drives usually happened around 2 or 3 a.m. when most people weren't out, and that's exactly what I wanted. Anyways, I'm writing this after getting home from one of those drives, and I'm hoping someone here can help me make sense of it, or at least tell me if I'm going crazy. While I waited, I rubbed my hands together, trying to keep warm. I always felt a little vulnerable, just sitting there in the car, waiting for it to heat up. So I kept glancing around, checking to see if my parents had noticed, or if anyone was walking around, even though it was late. But like every other night, there was no one around. No one to see me start up the car. And once I pulled out of the driveway, it was the same. Still no one around. I drove out of the neighborhood and onto the main road. After a while, I turned off and made my way down the back roads. The pavement grew more uneven, the houses spaced farther apart, until they were almost entirely replaced by forest. I lived in the countryside, so it didn't take long to get away from society. I was driving down a road I'd been on plenty of times before. As I approached a bend, I noticed what looked like another set of headlights through the trees. Nothing unusual. I'd see cars every now and then. But when I rounded the bend, there was no one there. There weren't any turnoffs on the road, so I figured it must have been my headlights reflecting off something in the woods. But as I kept driving, the feeling of unease started to creep in. It felt like I kept seeing more headlights, vanishing in and out of sight, like they were just out of reach. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light, or maybe cars parked off to the side, turning off their headlights before I could spot them. It was pretty dark out, and unless something was right in front of me or had its own light, it was hard to see anything. A few miles later, I parked at my usual spot. I sat there for a minute, trying to shake off the feeling. It was just weird reflections, nothing to worry about. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to shake off the unease. I'd been out here enough times to know that in the silent darkness, your mind can play tricks on you. Something about trying to stimulate itself when there's nothing else to focus on. Still, something about tonight felt different. The headlights seemed too real to be just tricks, but they had to be. I couldn't think of any logical reason for what I was seeing. After a few minutes, I decided to get out. The cold air hit me as I opened the door, biting at my skin. The silence was suffocating, and I immediately regretted leaving the warmth of the car. The snow crunched under my boots as I paced around, trying to shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. Tonight felt different. I'd never felt this uneasy before. I laughed a little at myself, trying to brush it off. There was nothing around, just trees, snow, and the quiet whisper of the wind. I looked back at the car, my thoughts lingering on the road and those headlights. My eyes automatically scanned the trees around me, expecting to see some movement, but there was nothing. No cars, no lights, just the same endless dark. After taking a few deep breaths of the cool night air, I went back to the car, planning to head home. I got back into the driver's seat and checked all my mirrors. In the rear view, there was a set of unmistakable headlights. They had to be real. There was nothing else. I stared at them, not taking my eyes off the reflection as they grew closer. Eventually, the car passed by me. I glanced over at it as it went by. A blue truck, a middle-aged man wearing a high-vis jacket. As he passed, he briefly looked in my direction, and something about his gaze felt off. I can't quite describe it, but if you've ever seen those Uncanny Valley videos online, you'll know what I mean. He looked human, but there was something about him that made him feel not human. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The vanishing headlights, the constant unease, and now this guy in the truck. I put my car in drive and started heading home, but it felt like I was being followed. I saw more headlights ahead, which usually brought me a sense of relief on most nights, but tonight, they only scared me. Each time I got close enough, they would vanish. I glanced in my mirrors, and there they were again, more lights. With each pair of headlights I saw, my panic grew. Eventually, my dashboard lights turned off, and my headlights dimmed before shutting off completely. My battery had died. I managed to pull over to the side of the road, but there I was, alone in the middle of the woods, with my car dead, and my anxiety spiraling out of control. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and my paranoia only grew with the silence surrounding me. I zipped up my coat, put on my gloves and hat, and looked under the hood, using my phone's flashlight to see. But I knew it was hopeless. I knew nothing about cars. The most I could do was fix a flat tire, and recharging a battery was out of my league. I closed the hood and checked for service, and as expected, no bars. I stood outside my car, now hoping to see headlights. I saw a few, but like before, they appeared and then vanished. This happened a few times, and then I noticed it. The silence. It was too quiet. It was always quiet out here, but there was usually something. Birds, owls, something scurrying in the brush. But tonight, nothing. It was dead quiet. Not even the wind was making noise. No wildlife sounds. The leaves swayed, but the forest was eerily still. It wasn't until I saw headlights again that the silence was broken. I could tell these lights were different because they were accompanied by the hum of an engine. I got up and waved my arms, and the truck stopped. A big guy stepped out. I explained my situation, saying I thought my battery had died. He popped the hood, using his phone to illuminate it, and said, "Yeah, looks that way, bud. I've got some jumper cables in my truck. I can fix you up, and you'll be on your way." I thanked him profusely. Not only had this man stopped to help, but he didn't seem like some creature like the guy in the other truck. After a bit, he had my battery charged up with the jumper cables, whatever those were, and I didn't really understand the mechanics, but I knew my car was fixed and I could finally go home. As he finished up, I thanked him again, and he gave me a nod before getting back into his truck. As he started the engine and began to pull away, he glanced over at me one last time. His eyes lingered a little too long, just a bit too steady. Then, as if realizing he was staring, he quickly turned his gaze back to the road. But it wasn't the look itself. It was the way he moved. It felt off. There was something deliberate about it, like he knew more than he was letting on. Before he drove off completely, he called out from the window, "Take care, Aiden. Stay safe out here, all right?" The words were casual, but the use of my name, how did he know my name? I hadn't told him, and I sure hadn't seen him before. It wasn't anything overt, nothing that would make anyone suspect anything too strange at first. But something in the way he said it, like he had no reason to know it, but did anyway. It sent a chill down my spine. As his headlights disappeared into the dark, I stood there frozen for a few moments, trying to make sense of it. The silence seemed thicker now, the shadows longer. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that I was still being watched. But I drove home, and this time no headlights appeared, no cars. The night was completely silent, but sometimes I thought I heard whispers from the forest, like it knew I was noticing things I shouldn't. The stillness, the guy in the truck, the man calling my name. As I drove, the whispers seemed to grow louder. They were incoherent, but they felt angry. I could barely take it, the weight of the tension pressing down on me. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I approached the highway again, and the familiar sight of houses began to reappear. The entrance to my neighborhood loomed in the distance, a welcome sight. I parked my car, went inside, and came straight to my room. It's 3 a.m. now, and I still haven't been able to sleep. Every time I hear a creak in the house or something outside, I flinch. I don't know if what I saw on those roads was real, or if that man really did have something wrong with his face. Did I tell the other guy my name? What were the whispers? Can someone please help me understand what happened? Is there any explanation for any of this? Small update. I was about to post this when I noticed a truck parked outside my house, across the road. I'm pretty sure it's the blue truck from the woods. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more thrilling horror stories like these. Also, share your thoughts on the story in the comment section below. If you want me to feature your own story on this channel, you are most welcome. Send your story to the email provided in the description below.